So I didn't linger long in Santiago. I caught a killer bus, 3,000 kilometers from Santiago up to the Tacna-Arica border, then change at Arequipa and up to Cusco, my favorite place in South America. But when I got to my favorite little hostel, La Estrelita in Cusco, I found someone had broken the lock on my old backpack. And the only place it could have happened was Arequipa bus station, where I let it out of my sight. I left it in a lockup there, and I didn't see it get loaded, but it was somewhere from there on, because it was all right when I handed it over. But nothing of value was stolen, so I'm lucky. This was my cozy little room in La Estrelita, and they have something here that's kind of like an example of Peruvian ingenuity. In Quechua it's called concha. It's like a stove where all the heat gets transferred to the bottom of the pot. If you look here, the flame directly touches the bottom of the pot and it just encloses everything. In the old days they would have used animal dung or maybe twigs in a little stove like that, but it's pretty ingenious if you ask me.
The first place I always visit in Cusco is Jack's Cafe, run by my friend Jane, a fellow Aussie whom I first met when she was managing this place, the South American Explorers Cusco branch, which was a popular hangout back in the day. And there I met another Aussie, John Levers, who is to become a very good friend. He in turn invited me to history seminars and introduced me to some very distinguished archaeologists, including Tom Zedema and Brian Bauer, both of whom have published seminal works on the Incas. I also caught up with my old mate Christo, who runs the coca shop, a shop that sells things like cookies, shampoo, soap, all of them containing coca leaf extract. By the way, the coca shop, the South American Explorers Club, and this beautiful adobe and wooden window that must be hundreds of years old, none of them exist any longer in Cusco.
So after catching up with a few friends in Cusco, I decided to see my other friends in the Amazon region. I left Cusco by bus and headed down for the little coastal town of Ica, where there's an amazing archaeological museum. And the most amazing thing in there are these rather basic looking things carved from whale bone called Yupanas. Archaeologists have been studying Yupanas for over 100 years. Initially they thought they were board games like checkers or chess. Others thought they were maybe a basic calculating device. But then around about 2002, an Italian engineer called Nicolino di Pasquale, he got a copy of this book as a Christmas present. Now this book is a valuable resource. It has around about 1,200 pages and almost 400 illustrations, and it's almost 400 years old. In it, on page 36, was a drawing of a Kipukumayok. A Kipukumayok was a keeper of the quipus, which were knotted strings that they used for recording information. Because the Incas didn't have paper, Di Pasquale noticed something that all the archaeologists and historians had missed in the bottom left-hand corner. There was a bunch of squares with little dots in them, and when he looked closer, they seemed to indicate the Fibonacci series, which got his mathematical mind working. And within 40 minutes, he said, he had cracked the code. That was an Inca calculating device at the feet of the Kipukumayok. These Yupanas are kind of like Chinese abacus, but on a flat tablet, or you can even scratch squares in the ground and use it that way. But then it gets even more interesting. Remember Tom Zedema? He deciphered a calendar that was woven into an Inca textile. Using that as a base, Di Pasquale was able to see the Yupana also could be used for calendrical and astronomical calculations, including the transit of Venus. And there is some speculation that points to a connection between Mesoamerican astronomy and that of the high Andes. Scholars were not universally approving of Di Pasquale's theory, and it's still a matter of some debate. However, to prove his point, he tried it on 16 different Yupanas in different museums around the world. It worked on all of them. He tried several different base numeral systems. It worked. And he even built an electronic version of the Yupana just to prove his critics wrong, and it worked as well. And it doesn't end there. Now the Yupana has undergone a renaissance in Peruvian schools. They're starting to be taught as an easier way to learn mathematics, because it only takes about 2 hours to learn how to use a Yupana, And you don't have to know your multiplication tables.
Porque incluso para realizar los cálculos con esta metodología no es necesario conocer la tabla de multiplicar.
La diferencia principal es que esta se trata de una matemática no basada en fórmulas, sino basada en formas y movimientos.
Aprender esta metodología es sencilla. Incluso en un par de horas uno podría estar resolviendo problemas de sumas.
And according to some experts, it's so simple and yet so powerful that a child can move them around in his own manner and still come out with the correct answer.
Que cada yupanqui, o sea, cada operador matemático, puede tener su propia estrategia y eso crea una gama de creatividad maravillosa.
According to these studies, the Yupana are more powerful and more accurate than a pocket calculator. It's amazing. I think it's another example of our cultural superiority being taken down a notch. Not that that would surprise Waman Poma and his Kipukomayok. They would say,
las apariencias engañan.
The flight from Lima to Iquitos was memorable for two reasons. One was because the captain left the door to the cabin open for the duration of the flight, and secondly because a little old lady had to be forcibly removed, kicking and screaming, by airport security because she didn't recognise the airport as her hometown of Pucallpa.
I said, put me down, you ugly furball.
Iquitos airport looked like a war zone with abandoned aircraft everywhere. But there was in the airport reception area this display touting Honda's new high-tech assembly plant. Welcome to Iquitos, where tuk-tuks are ubiquitous. And it's not unusual to see live pigs in the back of them. Or police. A Peruvian paddy wagon. Or patriots. Or prisoners. Or pizzas. I've heard of pizzas being delivered piping hot and oven fresh, but this is ridiculous, especially when you consider how much rain they get here. Check out the hot seat on the pizza delivery bike. Chinese cruiser bikes seem to be getting more popular every day in Peru. How about these rat bikes? What about that carby? It's really out on a limb. You'd need a strong engine to pull that cargo. Iquitos really does have a frontier, Wild West kind of atmosphere. And you never know who you might meet here. I think this explains the scream I heard coming from the next door bathroom this morning. This colourfully coloured couple call themselves Jaguar Man and Anaconda Woman. And they tried through dancing in this body paint give the audience an idea of what it's like to have an ayahuasca experience. Unfortunately, the rain started and started washing off their body paint. By the way, my t-shirt reads FBI, Federación de Borrachos de Iquitos, the Drunks Federation of Iquitos. Mad Mick sells those t-shirts to raise money for street kids. I met up and had a beer with Mad Mick. You see, Mick here is drinking Iquiteña beer, his favourite. It was kind of new back then. He said they sent some Czech brewers out, some British investors started the brewery. And everything was going well, and then when they went back, the quality fell so badly and so quickly, they had to call them back in a rush and teach them all again. And you see that poster, it says, "Our beer is good." And the model for that poster, Mick said, was a former beauty queen, Miss Amazonas, a local girl. He's still there with his secretary Aura selling real estate and other things. We used to meet up and have Vegemite Marmite breakfasts on the Malecon, which is the waterfront. And he's still got this crazy sign out the front of his house. This is my friend Patty Webster, who runs a medical charity in the Amazon jungle. And she's become a bit of a collector of Inca ceramics. And what she's holding there is known as a Peruvian whistling pot. They date back even before the Incas, and they are quite strange because they resonate at a frequency which the human ear is most sensitive to. Now, during 2008, they were constructing this floating ayahuasca pyramid, 1/16 the size of the ones in Egypt, all designed and paid for by a British guy called Julian Haynes, who had the vision after taking ayahuasca to go ahead and build this thing, but it never got much more finished than this. You know you're in the middle of the Amazon when even the cake shops have crocodile skulls as ornaments. Up early in the morning to catch one of these fast launches to the triple frontier of Brazil, Colombia and Peru, in the town of Leticia where I had friends. They had movies like on an aeroplane, but you could hardly hear above the engine noise. The food too was like an airline meal. I later became friends with a retired American in Cusco who, taking this very same boat trip, was assaulted by river pirates and abandoned on the side of the river overnight while they got away with all their money in the boat. River piracy and theft of high-value cargo up and down this river is one reason 3 navies face each other at the triple frontier, Colombia, Peru and Brazil. The other reason is the war on drugs. So finally we're here, the frontier town of Santa Rosa, Peru. Cleared immigration and a short motor launch trip across the Amazon, and I'm in Colombia, in the town of Leticia. Leticia's migration office is inside the airport, where there's lots of posters that remind you that this country is still at war. Wanted posters for guerrillas and anti-drug posters everywhere. Yeah, it kind of made me sad because it reminded me of when I was a teacher in Cartagena. I had a class of little 9-year-old kids, and I asked them to write down something, what they hoped for the future, and we were going to put it in a time capsule, and we did. And so many of those kids wrote, I hope the kidnappings end, I hope peace comes to Colombia, I hope they catch Tiro Fijo, who was the guerrilla leader. Well, they never caught him. He died of a heart attack just before I got into Leticia, but some of the kids' families in my class had been directly affected by kidnappings and extortion. Just before I finished my teaching contract in 2002, there were a wave of bombings in Cartagena that killed a few people. This poster asks the FARC guerrillas, did they have a good sleep? Are their dreams coming true? It then asks them, are they fed up with being in the guerrilla? It promises them money, a new identity, a new place to live if they hand in their arms, explosives. Basically, the Colombian government tried to bankrupt the FARC because it costs a lot of money to arm and train and put it in a uniform and keep the morale up of the guerrillas. And this poster forms part of a propaganda war that the Colombian government is slowly winning, I feel. Just a few weeks before I got to Leticia, and it was still currently in the news, was the rescue and liberation of a female senator, a senadora, Ingrid Betancourt, who'd been held hostage for 6.5 years. It caused immense jubilation and hope in the country, which eventually did lead to steps towards peace and the signing of a peace accord with the guerrilla a number of years later. Now I could sense a wave of optimism was sweeping Colombia, that the worst was behind them. And that was good news for me too, because I was planning on this motorbike trip. I wanted to go to the very far north of Colombia, the Guajira Peninsula, and that wasn't safe before. But now it was more and more looking like maybe I could do it if things keep improving in Colombia with regards to the guerrilla movement. You can pass freely between the 3 countries here. You only have to register with immigration when you arrive or when you leave by air or by boat. This is my friend Justo, who I've known for a number of years. He likes jiu-jitsu, and he also likes motorbikes, and showing me around on his motorbike. There are some roads around here, believe it or not, that go for over 100 kilometres. But the one we took, we were forced to turn back by a sand trap. A big cat's paw, an armadillo shell, and a leg of a deer. That's sad to see. But maybe to be expected, seeing we're in the frontier of the jungle. I wonder if he was given a voice, what that poor big cat would say to us humans. It's quite common to see only the adult wearing a helmet when they're taking their kids to school here. Despite the law saying otherwise. Oh no, looks like a pinchazo, a flat puncture. It's probably due to my extra weight too. We had to push the bike for about 2 miles till we got to a restaurant that had a swimming pool. Lots of colourful butterflies here too. Luckily there was a cell phone signal there so he could call ahead and get a guy to come out and fix it. But we're still a long way from the tyre place. What started out as a sunny jaunt into the countryside turned into this, a miserable soggy pain in the butt. But at least tropical rain is not so cold, it's almost warm actually.
Mucha lluvia, hermano.
¿Mojada? ¿Muy mojada?
Me había olvidado.
Oh, mira sus pantalones.
It says, beware, savage dogs and electric fence. But this dog doesn't look too savage, he looks friendly, and the poor guy looks injured too.
Hola, pero bravo. Venga.
Soon we were back on the road again, enjoying some late afternoon sun. Justo's father was a Baptist minister and they invited me to his nephew's birthday party, where they had a unique local custom, planting a coconut palm along with a bag of salt to mark the occasion.
Esta es la ceremonia para sembrar un árbol para el primer nieto.
¿No es el segundo?
No, primero.
You can see here they're adding a bag of salt, which they said helps the coconut grow because it thinks it's living by the ocean.
Chao.
Chao.
Looks like they're moving house. That little island there is called Isla Carbon, which means coal island. And people dig coal out of there, but only when the river is low, in the dry season. Those people swimming in the Amazon, they don't seem too worried about piranhas. The cemetery looked tidied up and lots of candles burning because tonight's the 31st, which is All Saints, Todos Santos in Spanish, but it also means it's Halloween. And some of these clubs and discos had like competitions where they gave cash prizes for the best costume.
La egipcia número 3. Ahí está. Uy, ¿qué es esto? Cuidado. 200.000 del alma. Así facilito. ¿Quién se llevará el billete esta noche? ¿Quién quiere plata? ¿Quién está pelado? Bueno, muy bien. El aplauso para la viejita. Ahí está la viejita. Muy bien, la viejita. Ahí, bueno, para que el jurado calificador vea todo cómo es la cosa. Viene con todo un ritual, jurado calificador, la momia herida.
That says Australian budgerigars. Birds in the tropics are very numerous and very noisy. But not Justo's mother's birds, they could sing.
Hola. Hola, ¿ves? Hola, Gringo. Hola.
Hola. Cuidado, suderos.
A mí no me muerde. A ti es que te puede morder.
¿A mí?
From little green birds to little green men. This is Justo demonstrating how to use his hands-free cell phone kit. Bikes are ubiquitous in Amazonia because they're cheap and they're easy to fix. It's generally flat. And they use them to tow things. Yeah, you could say bikes are big, but you could also say they're small if you have a look at this little mini bike. I told Justo about my plan to buy a motorbike and do a big trip, and he gave me some good advice which unfortunately I didn't follow, which was to get a Honda because they're more reliable and easier to find parts. He himself had a Honda. You meet characters in these little jungle towns that you just don't meet in the big cities. Now this man is an evangelist, so I don't think he's making things up. I just think he's too honest. So that makes what he's about to say even more intriguing.
Buscando oro porque yo soy minero. Descubrí un túnel en un barranco sobre el río donde hay carbón. Ahí hay sobre el mismo carbón donde hay millones y millones y millones de caracoles pequeños, ya están petrificados que parecen hierro. Ahí encontré una cantidad de huesos. A mí me parece que es un animal grandísimo porque cada vértebra es así de grueso y así de alto. Cada vértebra de la columna. Y la costilla que encontré me da más o menos del suelo y me pasa una costilla del suelo acá, me alcanza a pasar. Entonces digo yo que tiene que ser muy grande, un animal muy grande.
¿Y piensa que es un dinosaurio o...?
Yo pienso que debe ser un dinosaurio.
¿No es una ballena?
No, ballena no. Es un dinosaurio porque había una paleta, que eso no es de pescado, es de un animal. Ese es un dinosaurio.
Y tú me cuentas que cuando toca es como una campaña, una ding ding.
Ah, sí, por eso yo ya dije que está petrificado, que usted lo topa y suena como una campana, ya es como un hierro. Pero ahí lo dejamos, pero eso pesa mucho, eso ya es puro hierro. Eso pesa mucho.
Y es un lugar más o menos despoblado, más o menos.
El lugar es despoblado, ahí no vive nadie. De aquí donde estamos, en Leticia, al lugar, son 8 días en embarcación, una lancha.
He also told me that he took 3 of those vertebrates back because they were so heavy he could only bring 3, and he gave them to like the local municipality, the library and important people, and he never heard any more. One got sent to Bogota for analysis, but he never heard any more about it. He thinks they were thrown out. But that wasn't the only strange thing that this man discovered in his travels in the unpopulated areas of the Amazon.
En el propio verano, el agua está allí y el agua es oscura, sumamente salada, igual al agua de mar. Entonces yo saqué una olla 30, metí, saqué y dejé sentar. Al rato yo voy a volver a la olla, había esto de sal sobre eso.
Es como 30% sal.
Más o menos, entonces mucha sal, eso es una mineral. Ahora, ahí donde pisamos son unas pequeñas islas que lo aguantan a uno ahí, eso es pura sal, que rebasa sobre la misma lagunita.
If you stay in Leticia long enough, you'll start to notice posters of this man wrestling a giant anaconda. His nickname is Kapax, which means catfish in the native tongue. And just like Tarzan and Johnny Weissmuller, he was a famous swimmer. In the 1970s, he swam the entire Magdalena River, and he starred in movies, set in the jungle, and he's an eco-warrior for the Amazon, and they even had comics and books about him for kids. I'd met him a few years before, but I bumped into him again at the airport just as I was about to start the next leg of my venture, a trip to Cartagena on the Caribbean coast. Okay, I have to apologise because in the last episode I promised this episode would have stuff about the modern day explorers, going back to Asia, buying the bike and all that, but some people complained the last episode, 43 minutes, was too long, so I'm going to cut this one in half and make it shorter, and that stuff will be in the next episode. I hope. Takes a long time to edit these videos, but anyway, ciao for now.
Gringo Loco asks,
Hit the subscribe button.
please subscribe.